program, full proposal applicant assistance workshop. I'm Leslie Loudon. I'm chief of the bond section at the Division of Financial Assistance at the State Water Resources Control Board. And we have a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to be very brief. I was going to read the evacuation procedures, but I don't believe I have to because I think you all know how to get out of this room. So you all work here. I think I'll go ahead and put up the agenda for the workshop. The agenda and the presentations were emailed out to all of the applicants that were invited to submit the full proposals. And so you should all have the agenda and the presentations. We've had a couple little minor changes to the presentations, with just some typos and things like that we noticed, so don't panic if your presentation is a little bit different than the one we're showing. We will be posting this final presentation on our website, and this workshop also is being recorded, so if there are other people that want to, in your organization, that want to watch the workshop, that will also be available. I do want you to notice on the agenda the email address for you to send in questions to. It is dfa_grants@waterboards.ca.gov. And so throughout the workshop here, you can be emailing your questions in, and at the end of the workshop, after we go through the presentation, we'll be taking those questions. We do have quite a bit of detail to go through in the presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Laura here. Hopefully she'll be able to answer all those questions, and at the end of the workshop you'll have all your questions answered. If not, if things come up after the workshop, you still have that DFA grants at waterboards.ca.gov that you can email questions to, and we'll get back to you. So Laura McLean and her staff are going to now go through the presentation, and then we'll take your questions. Laura?
Okay, thank you, Leslie. All right, we've got lots of material, as Leslie stated, so we're going to kind of zoom through things and answer questions at the end. All right, so our presentation outline, we're going to cover the timeline, the concept proposal feedback, full proposal content, full proposal scoring criteria, the application attachments, and we're going to spend some time on that section. Submitting the full proposal will give you a little bit of information on FAST, just a few things about after the award if you get awarded, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Okay, this is our latest and greatest timeline. If you'll notice, there's a little asterisk there. It is subject to change. I think it's pretty close to the last one we sent out, just a little more specific. The full proposals are due by June 27th. FAST will close at 5 p.m. We hope to post the recommended funding list, the draft funding list, in possibly late August, early September. We plan to try and bring the funding list to the board for approval in late September or early October. Grant agreement deadline, we'd like to have those all signed by February of 2013. Work completion deadline is March 2016 with your final invoice due in April 2016. And Kelly's going to cover in some detail how those deadlines work out when you're preparing your schedule for your proposal. Okay, so we're going to talk just very briefly about the concept proposal feedback, give you an overall idea of our feedback, which we also included a tip sheet for you, and then project specific, and then a funding update. Okay, so we did send a tip sheet out in our email on May 9th. If you don't have that, you should have a copy of it. It just some general observations on some issues we saw with the concept proposals, and then some specific things that are different with the full proposal. So we talked about schedule, some issues with calculating match funds, addressing potential degradation of groundwater with infiltration of stormwater, whether your DAC claim is appropriate or not, and the reminder that each and every proposal should include an education and outreach component. Okay, in terms of the project-specific comments, those are posted on FAST, and we're going to show you towards the end of the presentation exactly where those are at, because I think some folks are still having trouble finding the summary comments. And in addition, we emailed that location to you in our May 9th email. Okay, a little update on our funding request at this point. There are $42 million available in round one for implementation. We had 90 applications requesting approximately $119 million in grant funds with $54 million in match. We have invited back 37 projects totaling $65.7 million in funds requested for this full proposal, so at about 150% of the funds we have available. All right, now we're going to go into the full proposal, what you guys want to hear about. Just for reference, if you look in the guidelines on pages 11 through 14, you will find specific discussion of the full proposal guidelines. And then the actual application questions are in Appendix E1, pages 38 through 44. So you can kind of flip back and forth as we're doing this presentation, and where we reference specific sections or questions, we've tried to include the page number so that you can kind of look at that as we're going through this presentation. Okay, we're going to go to the scoring criteria portion of this. We'll talk about the eligibility review, which should be not a lot of that at this point. Hopefully everybody's eligible. You've been invited back. And then we'll focus on the project evaluation as we did with the concept proposal workshops. Okay, so our eligibility criteria needs to provide long-term water quality benefits, and this is key. We saw a lot of proposals that treated the symptoms of degradation but not the causes of water quality degradation due to stormwater, and that's really what this is for, treating the causes or preventing the water quality degradation. Your proposal, your full proposal, should be consistent with your concept proposal, and the only substantial changes we would expect are where you're addressing comments we made in your summary comments. And we hope you've been responsive to those comments. We tried to spend a lot of time to get you information to make it a better proposal. If somebody just totally blew us off, then perhaps we might not score you on this one. And then you can see the scoring criteria is on page 38 of the guidelines, or the eligibility criteria, questions 1 through 6 and 9. So there's your little reference as we go through. Okay, so just an overview of the scoring criteria. These are by sections that correspond with both your application and the scoring criteria sections in our guidelines. There are 10 points available for project significance, 20 points for meeting the LID goals or implementing the TMDL, 10 points for magnitude and assessment of the pollution reduction, 10 points for best management practice in pollution reduction, 10 points for water quality goals and monitoring, 20 for multiple objectives, 10 for project cost effectiveness, 10 for planning, and 5 for project readiness. That's a total of 105 points possible for this round, with 5 bonus points if your project directly benefits a DAC. If you are going, as you go through your application, one quick hint, you might want to flip back and forth between your questions and the scoring criteria. There's information on that scoring criteria, what we as reviewers are looking at, and I think you might find that very helpful as you prepare your application, or at least to check through your application when you're done. Okay, so project significance. The first area that you'll be scored on, is it a high priority watershed? And does the project target the appropriate constituents? In terms of determining if it's a high priority watershed, talk to the regional board, reference your basin plan, and also if you have a local watershed plan and your project is in a high priority for your local watershed plan, let us know that, okay? Okay, meeting LID goals. We have LID BMPs or principles to be implemented. How will the pre-development, post-development hydrographs be achieved? So you're looking at what your pre-project runoff is from the site and post-project runoff. Does the project include urban greening, smart growth, or address pollution associated with transportation land uses? And this is for project type PT1. This is if you're an LID project. And then in addition, each of those questions are 5 points. Describe how the project reduces the rate of runoff, filters pollutants out of the runoff, facilitates infiltration or on-site storage and reuse of that stormwater. And in this section, you may be referencing technical reports. It's good to attach those, but it's even more important to actually give us a succinct summary if you're referencing a technical report, because we're not going to be reading through your whole technical report section. So give us a reference, tell us where it's at in the technical report, but give us that nice succinct summary. Okay, then there's project type 2, so there's 20 points, not 20 points for each section. You pick which project type you're applying as, and if you're project type 1, there's 20 points. If you're project type 2, there's 20 points. Again, maximum 5 points per question. So you indicate the TMDL to be addressed, its priority and its status. So if you have a TMDL that you're addressing that has not been adopted per the guidelines yet, you need to have a date that means that TMDL will be adopted before you're awarded. So look at that carefully. For TMDLs, you need to calculate your % load reduction after the project. Explain why the project can't be addressed through LID techniques. And does the project also address future TMDLs potentially, or future benefits to the water body that you're trying to improve water quality on? Okay, pollution reduction, the magnitude and assessment, that there are 10 points available in this section. And I have to catch up on my notes here, just give me a minute. Okay, does the project result in reduction of loads and concentrations of more than one pollutant? And ideally that will happen. What are your influent coming onto the site and effluent concentrations? Specify the methods you're going to use to determine that you have reduced the pollutant load. Does the project cause positive or negative impacts? This is plus or minus 4 points. Hopefully you will all get plus 4 points on this question, okay? Describe how effectiveness of the project will be monitored and assessed, and this will bring us to our PAEP tables, our Project Assessment Evaluation Plan, and that I'm going to discuss in greater detail later on. As I said, we're going to focus on the attachments in this presentation, so I know I'm zooming through here, but we're going to spend a little time on what we think is the meat of your proposal. Okay, pollution reduction, BMPs, there are 10 points available here. Is the BMP a proven solution for this type of pollutant? If you're using some new technology, you need to provide us with something, if there's a study or something that you can summarize that explains why you think this is a good technique and why you think it will be effective. Do the BMP design effluent concentrations meet the medium performance standards? And there's a website that you can go to and look at what those should be for the BMPs you've chosen. Okay, 10 points for water quality goals. Does the project help achieve compliance for impaired waters? If you're going to be doing water quality sampling, when will you be doing that sampling? And how are you going to sample? And then you're going to provide us with your plan for performance measures and a monitoring plan, or just your plan for performance measures. Not all projects will have a monitoring plan and a quality assurance plan associated with them. But if you do, you need to be aware of the time frame for the grant program and make sure that you can provide effective water quality monitoring data and have time to summarize it and include it in your final report. And it shows something valuable for this project. Okay. Multiple benefits. Okay, there are 20 points available here, 5 points per question. And a lot of these have to do with some of the criteria for LID. Will it augment the local water supply? This would be if you're doing groundwater infiltration, for instance. Hopefully your project will reduce runoff. If it's reducing runoff, it should reduce flood risk. Is it helping to address sanitary sewer overflows? Will your project restore or enhance stream habitat? And will it address carbon dioxide emissions or address climate change? Like vegetative swells for the carbon dioxide, and smart meters possibly to deal with climate change issues. Okay, project effectiveness. So this is an important section. You'll see this is where you will be attaching attachment for your detailed budget. Jeff is going to spend some time walking you through that. All of you should know by now we've updated the budget table. It's not the same one that's in the original guidelines. We've provided a link to that, and there's a link to that in FAST. So you're going to tell us, is the project, you're going to show us that the project is economically feasible and a good use of state funds, and how well can the project adapt to changing conditions. And again, we've referenced the page numbers and the questions for you. Project cost effectiveness. This is 10 points. Does the project leverage of any other funds? Are the estimated project costs reasonable? If you've read through your guidelines, you'll know that when we do the scoring on this, we're going to be grouping it by project type. And one of the reasons we're grouping it by project type is we can look at project cost effectiveness and kind of try and see apples to apples when we're looking at those budgets. Okay, project planning, 10 points. And this is kind of a bonus points section. Are there adopted policies in place to support LID principles? Is it in your general plan? Do you have a stormwater plan that includes encouraging LIDs? Is the project coordinated with your local integrated regional watershed management plan? And finally, and importantly, are you in compliance with your urban water supplier rules, and do you have a plan into DWR? If you do, we'd like you to provide us with verification that you have sent that plan in and that it's been approved. Okay, finally, last but definitely not least, this will impact your overall score, even if it's only 5 points here. And Kelly's going to spend quite some time helping you with this section. How ready is the project for implementation? You've seen our timeline, so you need to keep that in mind when you're preparing your proposal. Kelly will go through each of these items in detail, and this is just a brief idea of some of the things you need to look at when preparing your schedule. Finally, our bonus points. We had many creative applications with really interesting ideas about how this was going to benefit a DAC. If you look at our guidelines, they're very specific. The project needs to be located in the disadvantaged community pretty much for you to get these points. So please look at that. If you have questions, give us a call. We'd be glad to talk to you about it, talk to you about how we determine it, and give you additional information on that. Okay, and that's attachment 10. Okay, so the project attachments. As you can see, we have a couple of these items bolded, and the reason those are in bold is because they're very important. We're going to spend some extra time on that. That doesn't mean that the other attachments aren't important. It's just that a lot of our ability to give you a high score is going to be in, well, scope of work, obviously, but also this budget and schedule. And that's why Kelly and Jeff are going to go through that for you. The first part of your application is the project information. Then you have your attachments for maps and photos. I noticed in the concept proposals that many of the maps didn't actually show where you were planning on implementing your project. It'll be really important that you provide us with that kind of information in your full proposal. It's difficult to evaluate it if we can't really see what your project is. Okay, scope of work. So scope of work is we want you to tie that into your budget and schedule, pretty much walk across. So task 1 in your scope of work should be task 1 in your budget and task 1 in your schedule. So those should line up, and that will make it really easy for reviewers to see what you plan to do and that you do have a good plan and will be able to implement this project. Performance measures, another really important part of your application, and we will spend some additional time on that. Technical reports, again, I want to remind you, we don't have time to read through the entire technical report. Please summarize the key things you would like us to see in there and then reference the technical report. We'll look to see if it's there. If we find it fascinating, we might read it in our spare time or for nighttime to go to sleep. But other than that, summarize it for us. If you are requesting a reduction in funding match, Jeff is going to cover that briefly in his budget discussion. There's an attachment if you're asking for the bonus points. Those two kind of go together. Letters of support or opposition. Hopefully you don't have any letters of opposition to attach. Adopted policies, and it goes back to that planning section if you have good policies in place in your municipality. And then the completeness checklist is kind of outdated. We kept it in there because it's in the guidelines. I believe FAST won't let you submit if you don't have everything that you're supposed to have in there. But this is just for you to have. You send it in so that we know, yep, I checked through it, everything should be there. Okay, now I'm going to introduce Mr. Albrecht, and he is going to walk you through our new budget template.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Albrecht. I'm a project engineer, part of Laura McLean's staff, and I'm going to be touching upon these 4 topics. We're going to be talking about the new Excel budget template that was developed. We developed the template to create some consistency between our scope of work and the budget, and to provide a more direct transition to our grant agreement. I'm going to go through a couple of budget examples that we have posted on our website also. The budget examples are there to kind of demonstrate the level of detail that we expect from the proposals. I'm going to cover the reimbursable costs, talk about some differences between possible eligible versus ineligible costs associated with your project. And as Laura mentioned, I'm going to revisit the match requirements, specifically any requests for disadvantaged communities. Okay, as I mentioned, we have a new Excel template that is available through our website. We developed this spreadsheet to create a format for creating your scope of work, and again to allow for more direct interpretation between your scope of work, your budget, and to translate over to directly to a grant agreement. Clicking on this link, this is the link that goes through our website, and it will pull up the actual Excel file. You will see that there are 3 tabs at the bottom. The first tab being the README tab. So please do read the tab. The first thing you'll see at the top is our disclaimer, which basically states that this template is not foolproof. It is subject to errors. Everything that you do in here needs to be verified and quality checked to make sure that nothing is inaccurate. This is a completely unprotected file, so it is open to any tweaking by your staff. We recommend that anyone that uses this spreadsheet be familiar with Excel. There are some basic calculations in there that do some calculations, some summary calculations, and the match percentage. If they were to be changed, then obviously that would have an effect on the totals that are being calculated. And there are some additional notes below there that I recommend you read also. They just kind of expand upon what I'm going to talk about today. Then there are the other 2 tabs. The first tab is going to be the project budget. You will see wherever you see these zeros, that means there is a calculation being performed in that cell, along with a match calculation and a totaling cells down at the bottom. The last tab is the budget details, which I'm going to bounce over to our examples here shortly, which will show some of the stuff that's populated. But again, there are some zeros in here that have some basic calculations. So, pulling up, going back to the PowerPoint here, going to the next slide, clicking on this first link, we'll pull up our example budget summary. Again, going through our website. This is on our Stormwater Grant Program website. We developed this example to kind of give, I guess, what we would expect some of these proposals to look like. The budget does have these budget categories, and again, we would like your scope of work to be developed around these budget categories. So just reading through them, the first one being the direct project administration. Then your second one is planning, design, engineering, environmental, construction, implementation, monitoring, performance, and then education, outreach, one of the required components of your proposal. And so you'll see that we have our tasks broken out here under that should again be consistent with whatever you have in your scope of work. And again, there are some of the basic match calculations, the most important being the bottom line here, which does the final match comparison with your proposed match amount and your total project cost. Going over to our detail. Again, we kind of created this example to give you insight as to what we would expect to see. I like to say that this is kind of an opportunity for you to really demonstrate how well you understand your project, where your costs are going. Again, reviewers have no familiarity with your project, and so this is how you can demonstrate to them where your costs are going, how well those costs are understood. And again, you'll see that these tasks here are going to be consistent with what you just saw in the budget summary table and should also match your scope of work. It's important for me to note here that we have in our example, we have agency staff where these disciplines would be part of the applicant's staff. The rate that we're using here, the rate that you use should be based on a fully loaded rate that can include wage plus eligible benefits. And it's important for you to note that if your project is awarded funding, these rates and these hours will be totaled up and tracked by your project manager as based on the proposal you submitted here. Your staff will not be able to bill higher than these amounts that were proposed in your budget, and we will be tracking the number of hours that are being billed. And in our example, we have some consultant contracts where we just use a lump sum to track that amount. The one exception to the idea of a task is we broke some of these things into a subtask. For construction, we use the assumption that you have an engineer's estimate, and we went ahead and broke the engineer's estimate into these subtasks to again demonstrate to the reviewer where all these costs are going. I would encourage anyone who has that ability to do it to go ahead and break it out to that level. Of course, once you take this amount and go back to your summary, we just want the one task total. If there are any aspects of your project that are ineligible, we do not want to see that in this table. We don't want those costs included. If you want to make annotations in here, if you have a certain line item in your construction that's considered ineligible, you can make an annotation to just draw it out. You should also discuss that in part of your scope as part of your scope of work. There is one very basic error check here at the very bottom. This cell is designed to verify that the amount of your total budget matches the same amount in your budget summary on that Excel tab. So it just goes between those two tabs to verify that those two match. So obviously if it says no, those amounts currently do not match. When you're done with your proposal, with your budget, we expect you to go ahead and create a PDF of both the budget summary and the budget details and attach those two PDFs to your application as attachment 4. So the next thing I was going to talk about is the reimbursable costs. We would assume that reimbursable costs are anything that's directly associated with the reduction and or prevention of stormwater contamination. There will be potential for some ineligible aspects of your project. Some things we've seen is we've had some major roadway proposals come in. There will be aspects of that proposal where if the roadway is not directly supporting the stormwater quality improvement, such as just replacing hardscape with hardscape, we would like to have you kind of delineate which portions of the project that is and draw it out, draw our attention to it. I guess the upshot is that those portions of ineligible parts of your project do not need to be counted against your total project cost, which in turn would reduce the associated match requirement. And finally, the match requirements were detailed out in our guidelines. This is consistent with what you've already seen. If anyone is seeking to have a reduced match, these are the criteria you need to follow. Anything that you are claiming for a reduced match needs to be very well supported. There needs to be a direct association with how that project is supporting that community, benefiting them, and also the data that you're using to claim the disadvantage aspect needs to be well supported. We need to have references as far as where that information is coming from. Otherwise, every other project who's not seeking that match requirement reduction has that 20% requirement. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly List, who's going to expand upon some of the schedule issues.
Hi, good morning. As Jeff said, my name is Kelly List. I am an engineering geologist in Laura's group, and I'm going to try and give you some tips on how to address your schedule and to provide a more competitive schedule for the full proposal. We will specifically be focusing on the milestones and how to schedule them to make sense and to be a little more clear and concise. That the required reporting and monitoring dates make more sense because some of them were overlapping, and some of the common issues that we saw in the concept proposal. For the milestones, when you're going through your schedule and coming up with your tasks and your scope of work, it would be really good for you to kind of ask yourself, you know, exactly how ready are your projects and your milestones. Are there certain tasks that you can be completing now that can make you more competitive for your full proposal? And are you scheduling enough time to complete the task, or are you scheduling too much time? We had some issues on both of those ends of the spectrum. And one thing we will say is please allow yourself enough time for your permits, land acquisitions, and access agreements, and CEQA. And if you're going to have land acquisitions or access agreements, provide us documentation demonstrating your availability to complete that in that time frame that you provide. One of the things you can provide, and some people did give to us, was letters from the landowners supporting your project and that indicating a willingness to give you access to the property once the grant is awarded. Okay, so for the reporting and invoicing dates, the schedule should, like I said, follow a logical process and try to simplify it where you can. The monitoring periods should fall after the construction for post-construction monitoring. Some people had it doing it before or construction ending afterwards, so just make sure you kind of follow those along and follow your process all the way through to the end. And the monitoring should also be completed before your draft report is submitted to us. And do not forget to put draft reports on your schedule. Some people didn't put that down there. They just put their final report. The draft report period is pretty important, so we just don't want you to forget that. And the work completion date that was listed as March 2016, that does not mean the construction completion date. That's not the same thing. Your construction cannot be completed in March and get all your invoicing and your post-construction monitoring and your reporting done in a month. So you just really need to keep close eye on how far out you're putting your construction end dates. And the monitoring should still be completed several months before that March 2016 date, so that you can get your sampling data in and get it interpreted and analyzed so that you can include that in your final report. Excuse me. For some of the problems that we saw in the concept proposals, I just want to try and give you some tips on how you can rework them for your full proposal so that you can be more competitive, and just to try and be cognizant of when the grant agreement execution date is going to be. You know, we want to have all those grant applications, the grant agreements executed by February of 2013. Some of the concept proposal schedules did not start any of their projects or even some of their milestones until early of 2014. So there's a year lapse between when the agreement will be executed to when the design was going to begin or any of the permitting. So if you have a leeway of a year, you should really explain why, because that just kind of left some questions for the reviewers. Many of the scheduled monitoring was scheduled for the 2015-2016 rainy season. So if you're doing post-construction monitoring and that happens to be a dry year and you wanted to do a wet season monitoring, what is your contingency plan? If you hold it out to the very end, you're not really giving yourself a leeway for Mother Nature to throw a wrench in your system. So, you know, you need to try and explain how you're going to address those issues. And again, like I said, with the permitting, CEQA, and other unforeseen issues, those are the main causes for delays in projects, and some of the schedules didn't really demonstrate that they were going to be able to address those issues in a timely manner. And this one was, the construction end date really should end before your final report is submitted and your final invoice. There was a couple that had it ending afterwards. So what that really kind of shows the reviewers is that you're really not taking this part of the application very seriously. And I realize it's only worth 20 points, 5 points for the project readiness, but it really affects your application throughout for your feasibility and correlating it with your ability to complete this project. And the draft final report really should be submitted to the State Water Board no less than December 2015 or January 2016 to really allow your grant manager time to review that and give you comments back. And the final invoice will need to be cleared through the accounting department by the end of April. Therefore, that final invoice should really get to the State Water Board, your grant manager, no later than end of March or the 1st of April, so that we can have adequate time to do our review. So we're just really hoping that you take these tips into account and address them in your final proposal so that you can be more competitive for the full proposal. And here's Laura to talk about the performance measures.
Okay, so we're going to move on to attachment 7, and this is your, let me catch this squat. There we go. This is your performance measures attachment, and this is a really important attachment, as you might be able to guess. This is where we are going to be able to use the information you provide us here and eventually run a report to be able to tell the taxpayers how wisely we spent their money and how much good stuff we did with it. So, your project assessment evaluation plan, it's the framework for evaluating the project. You're going to identify how you're going to monitor progress towards achieving your project goals. This is kind of your template for your final project report. And you will be quantifying the value of public expenditures to achieve these environmental results. So you're going to have a target value you're going to give us, and that can be we reduce pollutant load by this many tons, we reduce peak flow and thus flood flows. We increased water supply by this many acre feet. Those are just some numeric examples that you might be able to use when you're preparing this. So here's, this table is in the project guidelines, and I'm just going to walk you through it really briefly. You're going to identify your project goals, and these will be broad, something kind of a broad brush. Reduce runoff or pollutant load might be a goal. You're going to identify the measurable results. You're going to provide appropriate performance measures. How are we going to be able to tell you've got an effective project? You're going to tell us how you're going to measure it, and then you're going to give us those numeric targets. We're working on providing you with a couple of dummy project performance assessment sheets online so that you can kind of look at that, and we'll try and include some common targets that you might use. So for your monitoring plan, if you are going to be doing water quality monitoring, again, remember what Kelly said about the schedule, and also you need to think about it in the big picture. If you're going to use that as your sole reporting of project success, what if you have a dry season? How meaningful is the sample data that you're collecting how many sampling events are you going to be able to get in. So think about that when you're preparing this. If you have questions, if you're unsure of which direction to go on this, please give us a call or email us, and we'd be glad to talk to you about it in some detail. Okay, submitting the full proposal. Again, we have a deadline for that, June 27th at 5 p.m. And there it is. We're going to go, Kelly's going to come back up here and just kind of briefly walk you through the FAST, where to find your summary comments, and then just give you a few tips for FAST. And she's also our liaison, so if you're having trouble, you can talk to Kelly. All right, Kelly? Hopefully it's up there for you.
Okay, so many of you are already familiar with FAST since you've already submitted a concept proposal. On that main FAST website, there is a manual and a quick facts tip sheet that you can get on there if you are having issues. And I think on the previous slide, yes, I put the toll-free phone number to call the FAST Help Desk and the email address. As I mentioned during the workshops previously for the concept proposals, I do suggest you do both call in and leave a message and email. We are in the process of going through changing our email over from the system we're using to Outlook. So I do both. The one downfall is that the phone number is checked twice a day, whereas we check our emails when we're assigned as a liaison several times a day. So if you call in and you don't get a call by the end of the day, then you definitely should call back the next day but email in, because then we check those more frequently. Okay, so for the FAST help desk, you will just go ahead and sign in. I've signed in as one of our applicants that we've invited back, and so this will be your main page after you sign in with your username and password, and you go down to your active applications and surveys. Of course. I think I might have to sign in again. I do. Shoot. Okay, we'll see if this works. I think I timed out before. Okay, so you're going to have your access through here, so go ahead and click on your PIN number. And this will look identical to what you had in your concept proposal. And to get to your reviewer comments, you'd want to go to your Attachments tab and scroll down, and your reviewer comments will be here as a PDF document. You'll click on it and it will open in a new window, and you can go ahead and review our comments there. And you can see in the questionnaire, when I pull that up, the first questions that you will see are going to be the final proposal questions, which is your phase 2 questions that we're doing now. You can go ahead and you'll have the ability to go down to your concept proposal answers, which will be at the bottom of this. There's a lot of questions for your full proposal, so be prepared. And you'll see a disclaimer here in the blue bar. This will tell you your differences between your full proposal and your concept proposal questions. And also in that blue box there, it will tell you these below here is going to be your concept proposal questions. We as reviewers will not be reviewing these again. We've done that. We're done with it. However, you do have access to get into them, so you can copy and paste any of the information you've provided before into your full proposal. If you change anything down here and you don't put it up into your full proposal, we're not going to see it. We're not going to review it again and compare your answers from your previous application. So don't change it down in the concept proposal. Put it in your full proposal questions. And also for the attachments, there is specific naming protocols that you need to complete. If you're going to attach a new document, and it happens to be one that we have listed as a required attachment, you need to click on this drop-down box here and select which one of these attachments you're providing to us. For instance, the budget. Then you can go ahead and search for your file that you're going to upload here, and you can name that any name you want and attach it. But if this box here, this drop-down is not selected, FAST will not recognize it as a required attachment. So when you go to submit your application, it's going to tell you you're missing attachments. So this is very important, and if you have issues or if you're having problems submitting, you might want to try doing it before the June 27th deadline. So we are here, but we're only going to help you on a first-come, first-served basis if you're having issues on that day. And back in the questionnaire, I believe down in question number 40, this is where you will find your new budget that you can go ahead and download. You'll just click on that and it will upload right straight into Excel for you. So we did try and provide it to you in the most easiest way, but if this is not working for you, you can still go onto our website. We do have the Excel spreadsheet available for you there. I believe that's all, Laura. Do you want it back down there?
No, that's okay. I'm going to zoom. Hopefully no one's going to get too dizzy. Woo, here we go. Okay. We're almost finished. But I don't want you to forget to look at the grant agreement template. It's online. You can get the link on our website. Here it is. It's really important that you understand the agreement that you'll be signing if you are awarded before you submit your application, because that's the agreement that we hope you understand you'll be living with. If you guys have, we've started to also get questions as if you've been awarded. I think that's great. That's very hopeful. But what we plan to do is have a webcast for our successful applicants afterwards. We're going to talk to you about invoicing. We'll talk to you about how we do the work scope and getting your grant agreement ready and signed. We'll talk to you about resolutions. We've had a couple questions about that. It is always a tricky timing issue. If you don't have your resolution ready prior to submitting your full proposal, that is okay. Okay, there's still time, so don't worry about that. And remember that we're going to have a webcast for you and answer all your detailed questions about being a successful grantee. Here are your sources of information. Please look at the guidelines again as you're preparing your proposal. It's very useful. It's very important to us. There's our website, email address. If you're not on the LIRIS list, I think most of you are, but if you're not, you should get on there so that we update schedules on there and so on. We'll also notify you if you're one of our applicants too. Okay, email questions. You can see that dfa_grants@waterboards.ca.gov. So I think, oh, there's our pretty picture. There's a nice little LID. Do we have questions?
I think we have two questions. The first one is regarding the scoring criteria. So slides 18 and 20, scoring criteria number 5 and 7. And the question is, what is the difference between items number 5 and 7 in your presentation, the pollution reduction and water quality monitoring? There seems to be an overlap.
sorry. Here, Leslie. Very good. Let's go back to this. Here, you're going to get dizzy again while we go back to the slide where the confusion is. I think it was with these two questions, we had 20 points on the PT1. I believe this, no, oh, no, now they're telling me no.
That's the second part of the question. Try slides 18 and 20. The question is, what is the difference between those two scoring criteria?
18, the pollution reduction. Okay. Okay, let me grab the guidelines. This is always the fun part. This is the stump the state board. Yeah.
Versus how are you going to show the load reduction in your monitoring? I think that's the two differences.
Okay. Yeah, that's the actual full proposal. Right, okay. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at page 46 of the guidelines, and this has the full proposal evaluation criteria. And the section on pollution reduction, the magnitude and assessment, is where you're looking at your pollutant load reductions and what types of pollutants will be reduced and the positive and negative effects. And that is what this slide number 5 is the magnitude of your pollution reduction. And then the other one is basically how you are going to measure and monitor that reduction. What are your performance measures to show that those reductions were actually achieved? Yes. My staff is nodding yes. I got it right. So, okay.
And the second part of that question was about item 4A, which is right, I think
Okay.
slide 17.
Okay,
Or
17.
maybe 15. It says, the question is it unusual to have on-site storage and reuse and infiltration as they have different sitting requirements? This means most projects would get a max of 15 points. Is that correct? And what you intend?
That is probably true. There may be some projects that have multiple types of LID components where they have both some on-site storage and reuse and some infiltration because you can't infiltrate all of the stormwater at once. So it may be unusual. I don't know that all of the projects will get the full 20 points, but there could be a few out there that do. Okay, okay. Here we go. Okay, so the 20 points is the total of meeting the LID goals. So these first 3, there's 15 points, 5 points for each of these, and then 5 points total for these 4. So I think that was the confusion. It's not 20 points for describe how the project reduces the rate, filters pollutant, facilitates infiltration, and does on-site storage. That's 5 points total out of the 20 points because the 20 points are between the 2 slides. So here's 15 points here, and here's 5 points. So you probably can get most of those 5 points with any type of LID project. But again, if you do all of them, you'll definitely get all 5 points.
Okay, and so we have another question about fully burdened rates in the budget. The presenter noted that grantees are held to rates presented in the application. However, these rates will adjust over the lifetime of the grant, 3 years, with COLAs and salary increases. Are we truly held to the approved rates at the time of the application?
Since you're talking to state board people, I haven't seen any sort of a raise in so long. That's why we we put that in. The way that it works with the grant agreement, what you should do is make sure that the line item, as you calculate those rates, you can calculate separate rates for the 3 years. I would use then the mid rate in showing it in your budget table. When we do a grant agreement, we will show a rate, probably your lowest rate to start with, and then we are able to modify those rates if you get a raise outside. We don't have to actually amend the agreement. You would get approval from your grant manager to increase those rates in year 2 and again in year 3. But you can't go over the line item. You want to make sure that your line item for the personnel costs will cover those costs over the 3 years. So I would recommend just showing the mid rate in this budget, knowing that you need to know how you calculated it, maybe with 3 different rates over the 3 years. And then when we do the grant agreement, we'll work that out with the analyst as to which rates we show and how we would do increases. And my admin staff are nodding yes, so I guess I got that one right too. Oh no. Uh-oh.
Okay, this question is, can we contact the reviewers to clarify their comments? I'm assuming this means on the concept proposals. If so, how do we contact them?
We are recommending that you contact your regional board staff. The regional board do have access to, they can log into FAST and look at all the reviewers' comments, scores, and they can help you to summarize. Sometimes there are conflicts between reviewer scores, so we tried to summarize and make sure we captured the gist of the summary comments, but they may have some specific on individual portions of the concept proposals that your regional board staff can help you with. If you can't get a hold of your regional board staff, you can contact the DFA grants email, and one of the staff here can help you out with that. But start with your regional board. They're more familiar with the project, with the issues, with the priorities in the watersheds and things like that. And so hopefully they'll be able to help you first.
Okay, we've actually received a lot of questions.
That's all right. This is what it's for.
Okay, so this is, again, mostly about the budget. It's a 4-part question. The first is, who is responsible for labor compliance, DIR, or applicant?
Our attorney left.
Okay, we'll
Well, this is Prop 84. Prop 84 requires labor compliance programs. So, yeah, because that was in Prop 84, not DIR. So it is, the applicant has to have a labor compliance program. You don't do the new DIR requirements. Right. Yeah, yep.
okay, again.
No, so it is the applicant has to have a labor compliance program.
Sorry, the next part is, can the applicant bill at a lower rate than what is stated in the budget?
Can the applicant bill at a lower rate than is stated in the budget? I guess that kind of goes back to the question that we just had. I mean, yes, look at your rates and try to calculate them, and then when we get into the grant agreement, we're going to have a specific rate that's in your the actual rate that's in your grant agreement, and that's what you will be held to as far as your invoicing. You won't be able to invoice at a higher rate than that. But as far as calculating your budget, I think, as we said, if you anticipate having raises over the 3 years, maybe use the mid-rate in order to calculate what your line item personnel costs will be, but then you will be initially in your grant agreement put in at a slightly lower rate that doesn't have the raise in there. Hopefully that answers. So you can invoice at a lower rate. You can't invoice at a higher rate. Yeah.
Okay, the next part of the question is, can application costs, are they eligible for match? The cost of preparing your application.
Ooh. All right, Laura's going to look that one up while we take the next question.
Okay, and this
think
is
not.
for match requirement, calculating, is the 2000 census data still acceptable, or will you need to go to the 2010 data for medium household income? The person asking the question is concerned that it might not be available everywhere.
I would say we might have to check and get back to you on that one. I think the 2010 data, if it's available, use that. If it's not, justify why, that you weren't able to locate it. But also contact us so that we can check here in our group that works in the small community grants, because we have access to that data and we might be able to help you out with it. Okay, we've got the question on the match.
Okay, so the basic rule for match is if it's not an eligible cost for reimbursement, it's not eligible for match. Right, Wendy? Right. Okay, so in this case, that's not an eligible cost for reimbursement, preparing your application, so it's not an eligible cost for match.
Okay, our next question is on slide 3 of the presentation regarding project significance. It says slide 3, but maybe it meant
Maybe it meant.
number 3 of the criteria.
I think it was about the high priority watershed, maybe.
Yes. How do we objectively demonstrate that the project is a high priority?
Okay.
Okay, so I mentioned a couple ways that you can do that. We want you to be in touch with your local regional water quality control board, and if they say that's a high priority, then that's good enough for us. In addition to that, you may have a watershed plan that you've prepared, and your watershed plan may identify that as a high priority. You can reference that plan and say that it's been identified as a high priority in that plan. So if you have something that's kind of in the gray areas, that's a good time to ask us offline specifically about your project, and we can see how you might be able to deal with that, okay?
Okay, another question. Part of question 46 of the full proposal questionnaire asks how complete the project plans are and specifications are. What level of design and completeness is expected for LID implementation projects still in the proposal phase?
I think there isn't an expectation. What there is for you to understand the schedule, and that if you're at a 0% design, exactly how long it's going to take to get to your 50%, your 75, your 100%. It's not that it's a requirement that you already have started your design or that you're at a specific location, but if you think you're going to do 100% design in a month, we don't think that that's probably achievable. So you've got to have a reasonable schedule that shows that you understand the complexity of how long the design is going to take, and that you can get it done within the time frame that you have, especially if you're going to be subcontracting or anything like that with an engineering firm to do the design, that you're going to need to do your RFP and go out to bid and get the consultant on board and then do the entire design, versus if you're doing it in-house and you've done similar projects and you know that you can do the design within certain amounts of time. So just make sure that you explain what you're doing and that you have a reasonable explanation for the time frame for how long the design is going to take, and that you're going to then be able to get to construction again in time once that design is done and you're putting your plans out to bid, that all of those time frames make sense.
Okay. Will there be a project effectiveness comparison during the review stage? Project cost versus eligible cost versus desired measured outcome to evaluate overall project effectiveness?
I think this is one of the things that comes into when we're looking at cost effectiveness is the main area is what are we getting for our dollars, and what sorts of, and so to some extent there is, the reviewers are going to be looking at similar projects. The way the review panels will be set up, we'll be looking at the reviewers' reviewing similar types of projects, so it may not be a specific this project to this project laying it out, but it will be a consideration as we're looking at those and ranking them, which ones essentially give us a better bang for the state's buck.
Okay. If more work has been done to better define the project and costs, can the total cost change from the concept proposal?
Yes, it can. I know the concept proposal was pretty brief, and hopefully you have been working to get a better, more detail on the project and the costs and things like that. So we do anticipate some changes. Make sure that you justify that and discuss it when you're looking at the difference between the concept and the full proposal. And hopefully it didn't like double or triple, because that would show that you didn't have a very good idea when you were doing your concept on what the costs were. But we do, especially as you've seen, that detailed budget is pretty detailed, so we expect you to really have looked at and have a really good idea of the cost, so it should be a much better cost estimate in the full proposal, and we understand that.
This is another related question. How much latitude is there in altering concept proposal to final proposal? Example, our concept proposal includes 6 LID retrofit parking lots, and can the full proposal be reduced to 3 or 4 LID parking lots?
Yes, it can. Again, you need to explain it. You need to look at what the reviewer comments were. In some cases, they might have thought this was really ambitious. You can't do it for the cost that you said. You can discuss, maybe you've gotten some preliminary design and cost estimates that have shown that what the actual cost is going to be, or that you may not have access to all the locations. All of those things you can justify. It could, in some cases though, it may make you less competitive if somebody thought this is great, we're getting these 6 LIDs in an area that's really going to have a significant impact on water quality, and then changing it to 3 that are spread out where we're not going to see that same benefit could potentially make it less competitive. I don't know the actual situation on the project, but you might want to discuss that one again with your regional board and see, get their input into how it could be improved if you're reducing the size and scope of the project a lot.
Okay. If final design is not completed and pollutant reductions are not fully known, how can this be addressed in the PAEP? Are ranges of reductions acceptable?
Yes, they are. That's a good way to do it. I mean, you have you can make assumptions. You'd assume that this is the area that you're going to have with this infiltration and this type of, I mean, as long as you have a pretty logical thought process for how you're coming up with your performance measures, and then your PAEP will be finalized as part of your grant agreement, and you can make changes to it throughout the grant as you better define the parameters of your project and get better estimates and things like that. But definitely tell us what's the basis that you're using, what are the assumptions that you're using for making those calculations and targets.
Just real quick, we have a couple people who are emailing us specific questions regarding the summary of the concept proposal comments. We won't answer those in the public forum, but we will get back to you on those, and we can talk to you specifically about your questions.
That's it? Okay.
Okay, I think we're done, and like I said, email us with questions. We really want to help you be successful and prepare a really great full proposal. Regional boards want to help you. I will be providing applicants with a contact at the regional board. I already talked to them to make sure it was okay to give their contact information. They said, why, yes, of course, Laura. So thank you, everyone, and please, again, call us, email us if you have questions, and good luck.
Well, I can just respond, right? Yeah. Oh, wait.
as we continue to get questions, we will respond back via email. We're going to go, because I'm sure some people have logged off now since we said we were done. So we will be responding as we continue to get questions for those of you who are sending them in.